Just to remind everybody, this is the third of the 3 sessions that we've been running to kick off the Ambassador Schools program in your school or college. Our first session, Anna introduced the program as a whole and introduced the European Parliament Liaison Office and what kind of opportunities there are for schools and colleges that get involved as Ambassador Schools. Yesterday, we heard from Sana and Tiffen, who talked about the current kind of political situation and what the new parliament in the UK and in the EU means for UK and EU relations. And obviously, that's really important for schools that are part of the Ambassador Schools program. Often they're wanting to think about what sorts of issues should we be involved with, what kind of issues might we be debating, what kind of things might we work with other schools on, and those issues which are live in current affairs and which are of interest, particularly to the UK government or the European Union, may be things that give you inspiration and ideas to start with. Both of those webinars were recorded. They're up on our website already. We've sent around links and we'll send out a final link as well once this session, which has been recorded and uploaded tomorrow. So today, what we are going to focus on is the practicalities of the program. So what does it actually mean to be an ambassador school? How do you gain accreditation? What are the criteria for gaining that accreditation? How do you share evidence, upload that evidence to our website? And where can you get ideas from for things to do or things for your students to be doing? I'm going to share some ideas from ambassador schools that have been involved over the last few years, and also ambassador schools that are around the EU as well. I'm going to give you a walkthrough of the process for uploading evidence to the Ambassador Schools website. And if you have any questions as we're going along, please do pop those in the chat, and I will try and get to those as we can, or raise your hand. But as it's me managing this meeting on my own and running it, I may miss those raised hands, but I will do my best to answer questions as we go along, and I'll try to make sure that we leave time at the end as well to address any questions. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Asher. I'm the primary sort of contact for the Ambassador Schools program. So where you've got any questions, please do always email them through to me and I'll do my best to answer them. I'm a consultant working for the European Parliament's Liaison Office on their schools programs. So just to sort of recap what we want Ambassador Schools to be and what Ambassador Schools get out of it. It's an accreditation program by the European Parliament. So there are some criteria that we need you to fulfill. And those are really, in broad terms, around promoting democratic engagement, promoting cultural exchange, obviously particularly thinking about Europe and how do we create those kind of links that the European Union wants to create between EU countries, but also between other countries in Europe and around the world, including the UK, obviously. The whole essence of the European Union is about, through creating links, whether they're trading links or cultural links or democratic links, that we create a more peaceful and prosperous world. And the European Parliament Ambassador Schools program is a small part of that. In so doing, what we want to see is how your students are building their skills. We want this to be something which is valuable to them, something that they can add to their UCAS forms, they can add to their CVs, something where they can evidence the role that they've played, not just as participants within the program, but actually active people who are promoting what they're doing, who are organizing, who are building their teamwork skills, building their leadership skills. And this is a program which is about promoting that and promoting European values, promoting British values, which coincide so closely. And so we're looking for schools that are willing to share what they're doing with one another, and willing to learn from one another, and ideally to network together. I said there were certain criteria which need to be met. These are very broad and flexible, and often activities that you do will meet many of these criteria all at once. I'm going to talk shortly about how how you might fit this into your school week, month, and year, and the types of activities that are run. You'll see when we go on to those that many of them are things which can meet several of these criteria all at once, and you can get a sense of how long it might take to sort of plan these different activities and meet these different criteria. The first criterion is appointing junior and senior ambassadors. Most of you will be senior ambassadors, which means staff, and the junior ambassadors are a team of young people who are going to carry out the projects. Creating an info point is the second criteria. So this is somewhere where people in your school or college community can find out more about those kinds of things which their ambassador schools team is trying to promote. So that you might have things on there which are about promoting what the European Parliament is doing. You might have things about how you can engage with your local democracy at a town or a national or a UK-wide level. You might have things on there looking at sharing culture, or finding out about different languages from around the European Union, finding out about information from different cultures of people in your school. We're going to look at some of the different info points that schools have set up shortly, and so you'll get a clearer idea then of what that is. Europe Day, celebrating that, marking that in some way, is an important part of the Ambassador Schools programme. Europe Day happens on the 9th of May all across the European Union. We always have a big event at Europe House as well, but we ask schools to mark it in some way in their school or their college, and schools do that in a whole variety of different ways. Often it's food is very important. Sometimes it's about language as well. Lots of schools run quizzes and these kind of things, but just something to raise people's awareness that there is this thing called Europe Day, and what is it about? It's about promoting coordination, cooperation, collaboration through Europe. The fourth criterion is about having an educational program in your school that teaches people about the way European democracy works. That might be something which you run yourself. We've got lesson plans up on the website that you can use. There are also lots of resources from the European Parliament, which Anna mentioned previously, about the digital journey to the European Parliament, explaining how decisions are made within the European Union, how people become MEPs, members of the European Parliament, how people vote for them, and how ideas come from citizens and get debated in the European Union and become legislation. Also, we offer educational programs at Europe House or coming into your school as well. Then we have criteria about sharing European culture. This can be very broad, and it doesn't need to be limited to European culture. We have lots of schools do diversity days, for instance, where they celebrate all the cultures within their school. And the strong likelihood is there's going to be, within that, some people in your school are going to be European, whether that's from the UK or from within the EU or from countries that are European that are not in the EU, or even countries all around the world. We want to share that cultural learning, that cross-cultural fertilization of ideas to promote, as we say, those European values of respect, human rights, dignity, and peace. And a key part of that as well is this promoting of democratic engagement. So this isn't just about getting people voting, although that may be a part of it. It's about looking at how you can engage with the democratic process. So this might be about teaching your students about how they can spot fake news. It might be about getting them thinking about activism. What are the issues that they care about, that they want to take action on? It might be about getting them to participate in debates and being able to more effectively get their voice heard. So this links very nicely with lots of oracy elements that schools are concentrating on a lot at the moment. And the final part is to share what you're doing. We need to know that you are doing these things so that we can give you the accreditation, but also because we then want to share that across the network of ambassador schools and give other schools the inspiration to work on some of the same kind of projects as you. So going into each of these aspects in a bit more detail, to explain what we mean by senior and junior ambassadors. Senior ambassadors are members of staff, so the person in your staff team or the people in your staff team who are going to support the program. But what we want to see is, as you say, this development of skills by students. So we don't want to just see a whole load of activities that are run by staff for students to participate in. What we're particularly looking for is where junior ambassadors, groups of students, take a lead in planning, in running some of these events. It might be that you have one small group, 3 or 4 students who do everything across the year. But of course, that can put quite a burden on them, particularly if they're in exam years or something like that. What we see works quite nicely in a lot of schools is putting together a small team to work on a particular event, and that they work on that little event, and that they get their accreditation for that at the end of the year. But they don't feel that they have to work on everything all throughout the year, although you may well have 1 or 2 students who are very keen to engage with the program and do that. I know, for instance, one of our long-standing, very involved schools, Cherwell School, I think there's a teacher or 2 from the Cherwell School on this call actually, have a huge number of students that they involve over the course of the year. And each time they're running an activity, they have a whole process for how they get students involved with that. Students can apply. And at the end of the year, they get all of those students who want to be accredited to reflect on what being part of the Ambassador Schools program has meant to them. They use this as part of their promotion for the scheme. They put it on their websites. They produce a nice booklet at the end of the year. And I think we've had 60 or ambassadors from that school. So your team of junior ambassadors could be anything really from 3 up to as many as want to get involved, as many as can show that they've had some role in promoting culture, promoting democracy, promoting European understanding. So how do you fit this in? Well, it varies very much from school to school. There is no set criteria. We don't require you to have a club that does this, although some schools do work in that way. We don't have a particular time of day or number of times that you need to meet. In some cases, I know for some of our schools in Scotland, they've had a particular part of the curriculum which this fits very nicely into, and kind of where it's been about the kind of global skills that they're trying to develop, and so they've timetabled that as part of their curriculum. Some schools have used it as part of their citizenship curriculum. But in other schools, it's been a much more kind of ad hoc thing that groups of students have got together to run certain activities, and they've had time of the year where they felt that was useful to run. How many activities are run per year is really up to you. You can definitely gain accreditation with 1 or 2 activities per term. We've even had some schools where they've pretty much done everything focused around May the 9th, around Europe Day. So during that week, they've run 2 or 3 different activities which have looked at democracy, which have looked at sharing European culture, which have ticked off the idea of student leadership, where they've got students running these events for one another. And also, lots of schools are running this as a kind of crossover thing, where they already have programs they're running in their school, and students are able to do an activity which, for instance, where they are taking on a leadership role, which works well for their Duke of Edinburgh award as well. We're not exclusive about any of these things. You may be doing activities which work as part of the Rights Respecting Schools Award, for instance, from the UN, and they also tick the boxes for the Ambassador Schools program. That's fantastic. We just want you to be sharing what you're doing, to be focusing as a school, as a college, on democratic activities, on cultural activities, on building up the skills of your students. It doesn't matter if it's done exclusively for us or whether that's mixed in with programs that you're running along with other organizations. In fact, we'd encourage it. So when would you fit this in your year? As I said, it really is up to you. There's no particular sort of timeline that we, as the European Parliament Liaison Office, are stuck to. And of course, it varies a bit from where you are in the UK. We know that schools in Scotland want to get things finished a lot earlier because their school year starts a lot earlier and finishes earlier. So we're very keen to be flexible with all of that. As you say, some schools really focus it around Europe Day. Other schools spread it out very much over the year. But if you want to have a timeline to follow, here's one up on the screen for you. As I said, we will share this presentation as well with the recording of this session later. So if you haven't yet, recruit some junior ambassadors. There's lesson plans up on the website. There's some posters you can use to advertise that, and there's a lesson plan and PowerPoint presentation that you can use to run your first junior ambassador meeting or first few junior ambassador meetings to get them starting to think about what kinds of activities they would like to run over the course of the year. We will then be sending you out regular updates for different activities that you can get involved with, where there are new resources that are being created by the European Parliament, where there are particular events that are going on that you might want to tie into. We'll keep you updated with those. We send out emails as and when these ideas and activities come up. And also sometimes we will get requests from schools that say, well, we're thinking about doing something, for instance, for International Women's Day. Do you have any resources on that? We'll look into that. We'll see if we can find some relevant resources. If we do, then we email those out to all of the schools that are part of the Ambassador Schools program. And one of the things which lots of junior ambassadors use as a way to come up with the ideas of what they're doing is looking through the kind of calendar of those memorial or day or celebration days that they want to highlight. So they might look at things which are about celebrating human rights or commemorating particular atrocities, for instance, Holocaust Memorial Day, for instance. They might look at the national days of different EU member states as a way of highlighting what they're doing or highlighting the backgrounds of people in your school community. So you're running these events. Post about them on your social media channels, let the rest of your school community know what you're doing, and also, of course, tell us through the website. We assess this evidence and share it on the website and through our social media channels. And when I say assess, we, of course, look at it. We'll let you know if we think, what does this tick off? You'll tell us, well, we think this is about democratic learning. And we may say, well, actually, it looks like there's also quite a lot of teamwork in there. There's some youth leadership, and we'll give you that kind of feedback as well. Very, very rare. In fact, I can only think of one instance in which I have ever said to anybody, this doesn't actually meet our criteria. And that was just not that it wasn't a good project. It was just on the basis that it was something that had been run a couple of years prior to them actually signing up to the program. So over the course of the year, your junior ambassadors, with support from you senior ambassadors, run these activities. You upload them to the website. And towards the end of the year, we send you an impact survey. This is an online survey that we get you to circulate amongst your school community to find out which of the activities you've run have had an impact in your school community. What are people aware of? And this isn't a pass or fail thing. It's just to give you feedback again on, well, it looks like when you ran this on Europe Day and you had the special food in the canteen, that was really well received and everybody remembers that. Nobody seems to have particularly mentioned this other activity that you did. And we'll highlight some things that maybe in the following year you can improve on or change. And we also look across all of the schools in the network and see what activities seem to have had a big impact. And then towards the end of your academic year, and again, you can tell us when you would like this to be, we will send you awards. So those are a plaque to put up in your school reception area, and certificates for your staff and students. We ask you to upload a list of who should be awarded, and then we will sort out those certificates and plaques for you. And where possible, we try to do some regional awards events so we can invite your schools and colleges to events where we can have a former MEP give out the certificates and plaques to your school. So I just wanted to give you some ideas of some of the things that people have done to meet these criteria. And it seemed to me that the best way to do that was actually to show you on the website the evidence that people have uploaded. So on the website, we've got here all the stuff people have uploaded about info points, and you can see that there have been some quite different sort of approaches taken to this. In many cases, people have a notice board, a physical notice board, somewhere around the school. And we've got here that Oldham Sixth Form College have done something particularly around food. And over here, Clevedon Secondary have done something which is much more about the individual nations in the European Union. And here we have a really creative idea from Europa School and Instituto Español Vicente Canada Blanche, who have a podcast together looking at what it means to be a European living in the UK. So different ways of people doing this. So we've got the physical notice boards, we've got the podcasts, we've got people using their digital screens around the school, and here from Wellington School, they're using their digital screens and also using them using the tutor time activities, having these coming up during tutor time. And I know at Heal School that I visited the other day, they were talking about doing, yes, their online info point. They also have on their website the information about their ambassador schools activities. So say epass.org.uk is a good place to go to look for any of these, for inspiration on any of these. So that was the info point. So what kinds of things do people do for Europe Day? So just a few ideas coming from our schools celebrating Europe Day last year. Notting Hill and Ealing School here had activities in their library, treasure hunt around the school, thinking about sharing European culture by sharing books by European authors. Manchester Hospital School had a student-led assembly, which they led across all of their different settings. They're a school which is based, is not geographically centralized. They're based in all the different hospitals for young people across the school. Carmel College had a quiz which they sent out around their school to just raise the awareness of what Europe Day is, and also raise some knowledge, improve some knowledge about what the European Union is and which countries are part of it. Educational programs, as I've said, Anna gave you lots of links to those in our first session, so I won't go back into that. European culture, we've got a whole variety of different activities that, and you'll see some of these have come up in several of the different under the different criteria, and that's absolutely fine. We encourage you to meet several different criteria with the activities that you run. So Oldham Sixth Form College, sharing culture, sharing food, as well as using that as part of their info point. Manchester Hospital School here linking in cultural exchange and Black History Month. So tying in with other activities that the school is doing, thinking about other things that are going on. And what I particularly like about this activity is taking a different approach to both Black History Month and thinking about European cultural exchange by trying to highlight an often kind of overlooked area, which is Black Europeans. European Day of Languages, of course, plays a big part in cultural exchange. Language is at the heart of so much culture, something really important to schools. And so even though that day has passed, if you've missed that, it's on the 26th, I think, of September. Of course, there's lots you can do around language as a way of cultural exchange. We've got the Lux Audience Prize coming up, which is a film award, partly funded by the European Parliament. And so one thing that lots of schools do is have showings of some of the films, age appropriate, obviously, for that are up for the Lux Audience Award. And we can organise to give you the correct licenses and so on for that when it comes up. Other schools are using their exchange programs, so bringing in students from overseas and visiting students from overseas is obviously fantastic cultural exchange. And Clistvale here linking with the Euros football competition. So culture, of course, is that huge variety of sport, of language, of food, of art, and so on. It can cut across so many of your different subject areas within school. And speaking of subject areas within school, we had from it was initially by Queen Elizabeth School in Crediton. They got their junior ambassadors, sixth form students who were studying different subjects, to each write a kind of starter for their subject. And those were shared across the whole school for Europe Day. Lytham St Anne's School saw this idea and did something similar along their idea within their school. So through Queen Elizabeth School sharing what they were doing, they put up on the website their ideas, their activities. They had their PowerPoint up here, and Lytham St Anne's used that as a great idea, developed it themselves, and that's really what we want to see, is that kind of sharing of ideas, learning from one another, and that's what the website is here for. And our final activity is about promoting democratic engagement. And so here we've got, again, some of the activities that have just been uploaded. We've got things that have come from Carmel College just in the last few days, and Wellington School in Scotland. Wellington obviously have visited the European Parliament, that direct engagement with the European Parliament. But we're not just looking at engagement with the European Parliament. We want students to engage democratically at every level, whether that's from the school level, which might be about student councils. It might be about thinking about how do they engage with making their voices heard in a collaborative way within their school community. It might be, as students from Carmel College here did, where they submitted evidence to the House of Lords and visited the House of Parliament, and they were getting involved in an issue that matters to them about building on the green belt and the grey belt in England. We've got debating activities. Again, a great thing in terms of democratic learning. How do students learn oracy, learn those and practice those skills of presenting their case, arguing, listening to one another, considering things from an alternative point of view? All of those are democratic skills that are being developed, and we want to celebrate that and give credit to that. So those are some of the activities that have come from schools in the UK. So you run your activity, you take some photos, you share it on social media, and submit evidence through the website. I'm just going to very quickly walk you through how you submit evidence on the website so that you have an idea of how that's done. There are also videos for this on the website itself. So if you are unsure, you can go onto the support over here using this website. There are videos on how to register as an ambassador, how to upload evidence, and how to view and edit your evidence. And I will just very quickly show you how you do that. So on the epass.org.uk website, click login, fill in your login details, and go to your school dashboard. and your school dashboard shows you which things you've done already. These boxes will fill up as you submit evidence. On my example school here, I haven't submitted any evidence yet, so nothing is ticked off. So I click on the Submit Evidence button, and it will have selected my school already in here, so it links that with my school's evidence. I put in the title of our activity, say when it took place. Was it part of our Europe Day celebrations? Yes or no, this wasn't Europe Day. It was something that we organised rather than an event that we went to that another organisation had organised. And what does it demonstrate? Well, this was our Ambassador Schools event in Glasgow, so it demonstrated communication, and we had youth leadership in there as well. How many people were involved? Fairly straightforward question. How many MEPs were involved? Now, as the UK is no longer in the European Union, very often it's fairly seldom that we have members of the European Parliament involved, but occasionally we will. We bring over MEPs from the European Union, and you may be going over there to visit them. So it's part of the criteria that the European Parliament Liaison Office would like to know is, were there any MEPs involved in your event? So that's what that question is about. Write a short report on what you did. Doesn't need to be a huge long thing, but just something that explains so that other schools might use that, because that's where we get this information from. So this is going to be published on our website. So if you have a bit more information on there, that's really useful for other schools to know. And upload a couple of photos. Obviously, it just makes it so much more appealing and useful for people if we can have photos up there as well. And if you've posted about it on Instagram or Facebook or your school website or whatever, share a link. So we'll just take our link here from Instagram, find the post, copy link, post that in there. If we've got more than one, we can just click add another link. And Facebook is a bit more confusing. Just click on the time, and then that gives you a link you can use up there. Don't worry if you haven't put anything on social media. That's not a problem, but if you have, it's useful for us to know, because then we can reshare that. We can help promote your school, your college, promote what you're doing. And click on submit. That will then send us an email. We'll have a look and we'll give you feedback. And if you look on your school dashboard, you'll now see that this is in our communication box. So we're starting to tick that off. And if this had been, and if we want to edit it again, we can click on edit entry there, and we think actually it wasn't just communication, there was also teamwork as well. We can update that. And if we look on the school dashboard, then we can see it's gone into here under communication and youth leadership and teamwork. So we're starting to tick off those boxes very, very quickly. So that's how evidence is uploaded, and we will just, the last thing I wanted to share with you was a few different things that were being run from around Europe. So the image you can see here is a program that was run in Austria, Faces of Europe. So it was people sharing their identity as Europeans, but Europeans who have a background from somewhere else as well. And so it was a photo, working with a photographer, creating some videos. A lovely little project. And in Bulgaria, there was a school where one of their students who was really interested in comics made a comic book on the history of the EU. In Denmark, they were setting up Skype sessions with members of the European Parliament. So, of course, I thought that might be particularly useful for schools from the UK. We do have contacts with members of the European Parliament. We can make sure we can put you in contact with people who would be interested to talk to you. If your students have a particular interest, if they want to know, for instance, about climate change, if they're interested in the European Space Agency, we can find MEPs who have that interest and try and set up meetings with you. There were lots of activities around the European parliamentary elections, obviously, and one of the things they did in Denmark as well was they had nationwide elections in ambassador schools. So people took on the roles of those political groups, and they had elections conducted across the whole of Denmark. And Estonia, Czechia, and Latvia went even further, and they created links between them, and they set up meetings between schools, online meetings between schools, with particular again, focused around particular days. So they had one on Holocaust Memorial Day where they had a short presentation about the event, and then they had some discussions between their schools. Again, that's something that if you were interested in doing that, we could help facilitate that. In Cyprus, there was a big campaign, again, run between different ambassador schools, where they worked together to get very actively involved in political campaigning. And the thing that the students, the junior ambassadors, decided they wanted to work on was about reducing homophobic bullying and talking about the focus that had on mental health. So they were a whole variety of projects they did around this, but it ended up in them actually taking petitions to the Cypriot Parliament. So it might be that you go down that very kind of explicitly political route, although that isn't something that you have to do by any means. Latvia, was a similar kind of similar project in some ways, although what these Latvian students were actually looking at was how politicians can communicate better with young people. They said, well, they weren't campaigning on a particular issue, but they were saying, we are not being listened to as young people. Here are some tips that we would give you as politicians for how to communicate better with us. Fantastic example of democratic engagement. So just very quickly running through all of these different ideas for you, and I now wanted to give you a few minutes to ask any questions that you have about the practicalities of the Ambassador Schools program. Anything that you're unsure of, anything where you want to say, well, would this idea work? Do we have time if we do this? What are the numbers involved? Any questions you have at all, please feel free to raise your hand, and I will come to each of you in turn. Or if you'd rather, just put a question in the chat. So just had a question about whether we have names for junior ambassadors. So we do want you to have junior ambassadors. It doesn't matter whether you don't have them at the moment. That's absolutely fine. It might be that it's much later in the year that you have the names. We don't need you to upload those until you want to get the certificates. So we don't need to know who your junior ambassadors are until you want us to start producing their certificates. It's fine for you. And as I said, lots of schools will not stick with one group over the course of the year. They will add more, and it's absolutely fine as well. If a student is involved in a project at the beginning of the year, they don't continue their involvement, we can still give them a certificate. That's absolutely fine. But it's up to your school how you want to decide whether it's everybody that's been involved at any level, or whether you want them to reach a certain level of involvement to get the certificate. That's up to you. But yeah, absolutely fine for you to grow that group over the course of the year, and then towards the end of the year, upload the list to us, and we will give them all certificates. Somebody's asked, is it possible to organise a pen pal style activity with a school from another country in Europe? Absolutely. We'd really encourage that. It's something that a number of schools have done. We've got this e-twinning group is a good way to find other schools that are active that you want to work with. If you would like me to, so because the UK is no longer part of Erasmus+, the e-twinning stuff is a bit more complicated for us in the UK, but there is a network set up by one of the senior ambassadors in the Netherlands, where she will invite you to her e-twinning network, and that will put you in contact with a number of senior ambassadors from across Europe who would be able to help you facilitate a pen pal kind of activity. I know that a number of our, or most of our senior ambassadors from last year are part of that network. Hopefully that's the kind of thing that you can organize through them. If you're interested in becoming part of that network, there's a little sign up thing on the website. Here, resources, contact other ambassador schools, e-twinning group, and click on there, fill out the short form, and that will give us permission to share your email address with Nicole, who is the person who runs that from the Netherlands. We will call the session to a close. I'll thank you all very much for your participation and your attention. Of course, if there's anything that you think of where you're unsure, please do just drop me an email. You should all have my email address. Lots of things will come through to me, whether it's Asher@Involva, which is the organization I run, or whether it's info@epas.org.uk, which is the website. Feel free, drop me an email on any of those, and I'll do my very best to get back to you within the day normally. And even if it's, I had a request from one of our senior ambassadors last week about creating a PowerPoint presentation, because he was giving a presentation to the senior leadership team to encourage them to allow him to run the program. I can work on those kind of things for you as well. So please let me know, and thank you all again, and I will be in touch with you throughout the year, and I look forward to seeing your evidence as it's uploaded.